Guys, we have an emergency little call here that we're going to be doing today. And this is a last minute decision to do this call. There's been a lot of buzz, a lot of chatter all over the internet on, this whole Etsy and, mock-ups and people getting shut down. And, I will say that we have not heard anything from Etsy directly. We have a lot of speculation. We have a lot of theories. We have, a lot of people pointing fingers. We have a lot of things going on as far as what people think is happening. Chris and I spent a good portion of yesterday literally reading through hundreds of comments and dozens of posts that were posted in various groups, communities, and trying to not just hear what people are complaining about, but seeing where it stemmed from. Could we find some type of clue or clues that would allow us to say, oh, maybe that's what's happening? Because what could be happening is we're jumping the gun saying, oh, it's mock-ups. That's what's happening. You can't use mock-ups. And now a whole bunch of people are taking all their mock-ups down because they think that's the culprit. And we don't really know. And so what's happening is people are panicking and people are either putting their shop in vacation mode or hurrying up and swapping out all of their mock-ups that they think are going to be in question. What we're going to do here today on a Saturday, by the way, at 3 p.m., I just got home. My son and his wife were in a pickleball tournament, so I was able to watch that. But here we are. I'm back at it because this is, like, to me, this is a big story, right? It's a big thing that's going on, and we do need to figure out what it is. And Chris actually was able to communicate with someone that was not shut down, but they were speaking to a representative that basically said that your listings were violating the handmade, which we're going to get into that. And then they went ahead and corrected a few things and got it reinstated. So we're going to address that as well and kind of talk through it. And Chris has got a bunch of screenshots from different conversations and different things in the terms of service that we're going to go over. But I will say right here, we are not at all saying that what we're saying is correct because we don't know. But I can say what I feel is happening. Chris can say what he feels is happening just from the conversations that have been posted. Because again, I personally do not think it's just a mock-up issue. And I think Chris would agree. Here's what I want to do though, Chris, before we do jump in and start, diving through all of this material that we have kind of queued up. I want to know in the comments, in the chat, if anyone has received a suspension for either handmade violation or a listing image violation. Let's call it that. Let's not even call it a mock-up, but that's what they're basically saying, right? If someone has had that happen, I want to get this conversation wide open. And then I want you to either post some of that conversation here in the comments, or you can just DM us. All right. You can go to Facebook and do that. You can do it. You can just send it to support@brandcreators.com, or just post it right here in the comment thread. So that's what we're going to be doing. So nothing really organized here, or somewhat organized, but we're going to have a free, open conversation. And hopefully you guys can give us what you've been hearing as far as, or even if you've received any messages from Etsy themselves. So Chris, I think I queued it up pretty good. We got about 173 people on right now. So I'd say that people are really interested in to see what the heck is going on here.
I'd say let's rock and roll. And Scott, to your point, right? This is our opinion based on all of the evidence, a little bit of common sense, and a little bit of thinking about this from both a seller perspective and from Etsy's perspective. And Scott, I know we were getting some comments in the chat about how they're kind of watching us and watching the Penn State Ohio State game at the same time. Just so you guys know, Scott is a big Ohio State fan. I'm a big Penn State fan, but we set that game aside, the fourth quarter of that tight game, because this is so important. And we knew that this was going to be something that was big. And we've literally gotten bombarded with emails, Facebook posts, and YouTube comments asking us to cover this. And so we spent the last day and a half basically digging into every piece of evidence that we have. And Scott, what you said a minute ago was basically, this is what we're operating on with what we have. We did reach out to Etsy. We've yet to hear back. I know Printify hasn't heard back either. Yep. But if you've had an issue with this, send us whatever you have, because the more information we have, the easier it is for us to dive into that. So if you want to tag me in the Facebook group, you can do that, brandcreators.com/group, or you can just send an email with whatever communication you got back from Etsy to support@brandcreators.com. And if that is additional information above and beyond what we have, and that changes our opinions on this, then we will let you know. But otherwise, we'll just kind of dive into what we have, what we've seen, and give a little bit of our opinion, and then how to address it depending on what your different situation is.
Yeah. I'll also say, again, we're going to read through the comments here. There is a bunch of people on right now, a whole bunch of you. And yeah, we're going to try to make sense of this. And if you can give us any information too, like, that's just going to help us. The other thing I would also recommend is we are going to probably do an update on Wednesday. So from what we gather today, right, and new information as it comes in, I told Chris last night, I feel like we're like covering a hurricane or something, right? It's just an Etsy hurricane. Because I do feel like, last night him and I were up till probably midnight, voxering back and forth with just new screenshots and new information. So we're going to stay up on it. Make sure that you subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't done so already, because we will be coming back here and doing updates throughout this week, most definitely. All right. So, Chris, where do you want to start? You want to go ahead and pull up what you got so far, and then we can kind of start plowing through it?
Yeah, let's just jump into it. And Scott, to your point, the question that we're looking at today is, are mockups cool? Is Etsy lighting the idea of product mockups on fire? Like, are shops going to get shut down? What are we thinking here? What's going on? What's happening? What is the evidence? What is the speculation? And what is the truth as we see it? And that really boils down to one single question, which is, what the heck is happening? And Scott, to your point, I made this just for you this morning, because you told me last night that you felt like a weatherman hanging off of that like speed limit sign, kind of flapping in the breeze, saying, oh, it's not too bad, as the hurricane came in. And we've gotten more and more information about that. So I'm going to go ahead and identify here as that like 12-year-old kid holding the microphone. And I guess that makes you the old wise news anchor or weatherman there. Although I will admit that this graphic looks a little bit more like your dad.
Yeah, it does. That's my father. He stepped in for me for the day.
But I won't complain. Either way, I'll take Scott or I'll take Wally, right? And so really what this boils down to, and I grabbed all of these just from Facebook, but we're getting comments on YouTube, we're getting emails, we're getting text messages from people that we know. It boils down to a bunch of people getting suspended, and they think that they've identified the issue. And there's three here that all think that this has been related to the mockups that they are using. Now, the question from that becomes, right, what is the rumor and what is everybody saying? And all of this boils down to basically one of two conclusions that I'm seeing being posted. Either your shop is going to be shut down if you use any mockups, and so the only solution to that is to order, especially if you're print on demand, to order everything, get samples of it, and take real photos. Or you can only ever use mockups, and mockups are cool as long as they come from the original source, or as Etsy refers to them, the production partner, somebody like Printify, which would mean, if this is true, that you could no longer use any mockups purchased on Etsy. Theoretically, Scott, you couldn't even create your own mockups if you have a little bit of Photoshop skill. And so when we're looking at something like this, these are the two conclusions. And Scott, if there's any other conclusions that you've seen, let me know. But these are the two most common ones that I'm seeing come out of this so far. And so then we have to kind of step back and look at the evidence. But I'm curious what else you've seen.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't want to like gloss over, like, you can only ever use mockups from the source, example, Printify. And we have to remember something. Okay. Printify is the place where you are connected to your suppliers. Okay, so let's just keep that in mind. Printify is giving you mockups, but those mockups are supposedly of the product, right, that they've designed. This here, and I'm just going to go and say it right now, and kind of get it out of the way, my opinion on this, I think is wrong. I don't think that that is what they are saying, because, and a lot of people have been really bashing on Printify as far as their mockups, which is 100% accurate. They're pretty bad. They're not that good. And so to me, that is not the culprit. I do not believe that. And what I do think, and someone already posted it in the chat and probably a bunch of other people, I mean, the comments are coming in like crazy. But the one thing, again, we're going to move through the evidence here of what we have. But the one thing that I will say in my common sense, like I'm not like super smart, but I do have pretty good common sense. And I would say that what there could be a problem with is if you're using a mockup, which isn't actually the product. It's like similar to the product. It's a t-shirt. It's just not the Bella, whatever, 4,000 or whatever the heck, it's like, that's the problem, or could be the problem. But them saying like, we're only going to let you use Printify mockups. That's it. That's all we're going to let you use. It just doesn't make sense. So let's keep moving through the evidence here, and then I think it'll start to unfold on its own.
White Gold Yellow over on YouTube just said, no way. That would be totally counterintuitive to their whole business. And that's what led Scott and I kind of down this path to figure out what's actually going on and what the evidence is. And so that literally leads to the question, like, what proof is there that there is a change to policy?
Right.
Etsy, unlike most other marketplaces, is usually pretty good about communicating policy changes. And again, if you guys have any additional evidence beyond what we're seeing here, please let me know. But based on all the digging, Scott, that you and I have done, this stems from basically three things. The first thing is one line in the email that a lot of people are getting that are having these issues right now, which says, based on my team's research, we've determined that your items that we removed do not qualify to be listed on our marketplace, and we're unable to accommodate them. I love the ridiculous vocabulary.
Yeah.
Additionally, we can assure you that your items were not singled out for removal. All sellers and listings in our marketplace are subject to the same policies. Then this is the line that everybody seems to be latching onto. As a reminder, using others' photos or stock images of items that are similar to yours is not permitted, right? And the word similar, I think, is where you were getting with this. But people saw that, and then they go to Etsy support chat to try to clarify this. And I've seen several conversations that look like this. And guys, a lot of these are coming from the Facebook and YouTube posts that we're seeing. So if this is you, shout out to you. But I kept people's names off of it because I didn't want to publish that otherwise. So somebody had written into Etsy chat after they got an email like that. And they said, what is this line about? And Etsy chat responded in typical Etsy chat fashion. And they said, you can't use mockups on a listing. And they said, oh no, is that a new rule? Can you show me where that is in the rules? What about Printify mockups? They said, if you're using a third-party integration like Printify, it is allowed as long as it's connected with Etsy. No. And they said, well, what about mockups purchased through Etsy? That's only allowed if you're using an integration, right? So there's clearly a little bit of a language barrier here. There's clearly a little bit of a misunderstanding of Etsy policy, and we'll get to that here in a minute. But that, plus the email, well, it must be the mockups, right? It must be something in my product photos that's leading me to get these taken down. And then that goes into, okay, let me look at this policy. Let me dive into the policy. And I've seen this screenshot of the Etsy item images policy over and over again. And I put a box around it, but I've seen this highlighted. And they said, if your item is made with production partners, which most print on demand stuff would be, there's an off chance that you're doing some print on demand from home or whatever. But if you're using somebody like Printify, it says, if an item is created with production assistance, the listing's photos should be that of the finished product or an image supplied by the production partner. And that's where people kind of stop, right? So they combined image must be supplied by production partner, which is pretty much the same thing that you're hearing here, right? Because they're saying, as long as it's coming from Printify, you can use that mockup along with this. And they're saying, okay, so I have to use only the Printify mockups. That's why my listings got taken down. One person posted this and then somebody else got their handmade violation, that same email, and they see this line in there and they go into a Facebook group. And that starts kind of this panic spiral. And Scott, this panic spiral to me, and I think I've lectured to you this in one of our probably 3 hours worth of voice messages back and forth yesterday. And I said, this cycle seems familiar. Like there's like a random Etsy chat. There's a vaguely worded email. And yep. I'm having a flashback. And I think this reminds me of what happened a few months ago with Canva.
Yeah, who remembers this? You drop it in the comments. Who remembers the big Canva craziness about you're not able to sell what you make in Canva. And then that just blew up. Now, I'm not saying we're going to downplay what's happening here. There is obviously something happening, and we have some other theories, right? It could be the mockups. It could be images that you're using, maybe. But I don't know. The proof is starting to tell us a different story. I do want to point back out before we get into the Canva thing, and kind of like dive into like this thing started, this little fire started by one conversation that sounds like it's from an Etsy rep that is probably not even in the country, right? It's not even stateside. It's probably someone that's just a support and they're following the script, right? And then they go ahead and they fire that back. And then all of a sudden that gets published. And then all of a sudden everyone starts saying it's the mockups, it's the mockups, it's the mockups. Is it the mockups, right? Is it the mockups? Who here, I want to see by a show of hands in the comments, who thinks that this is all mockup related? Now, I know some of you in there said, well, there goes all the mockup stores. I don't agree with that. I do not agree with that. I do not believe that mockup stores that are creating not AI generated mockups that are just a standard tea, right? If it's a certain tea, Fruit of Valoom or whatever, whatever the more popular ones are, right? Like whatever the brand name is, if a mockup place, okay, Etsy store, Etsy shop, buys the shirt, has a model and puts it on the model, and that's the shirt that they're going to be receiving, I don't know how that mock-up is going to be in the wrong. I could be wrong, but common sense says they're basically saying, and you're going to see this more as we get into the evidence here, they're more or less saying that they just want the mock-ups to represent the product. And if you're getting the mock-up from Printify, it is of the product. That's the big thing. So who here does think that this is just some widespread mock-up takedown? I'm just curious in the comments. Go ahead, Chris. I'm sorry. I went on a little bit of a tangent there.
Mock-up takedown. So, and we do have some people in the comments saying they don't remember Canva. So basically this same thing happened a few months ago where out of nowhere, between like Friday afternoon and Saturday morning, everybody in the Etsy community was under the belief that you could not use Canva for print on demand because of a vaguely worded portion of their terms of service, a misinterpretation of a chat with somebody who did not speak English as a first language, and a screenshot of an Etsy policy that could probably apply. And if you combined those three things together and interpreted it that way without reading through all of the terms of service, which no one wants to do because none of these platforms write these things in English, which after the Canva incident was actually something Canva committed to doing, was rewriting their terms of service so that human beings without Stanford or Harvard law degrees could actually understand them. But by Tuesday afternoon, that had cleared up. Canva put out a bunch of videos clarifying what they meant. And it basically all boiled down to, you can't take a single element from Canva and sell that print on demand because you don't have the license to do that. But you can use them in combination. You can use them to create designs. You can use them in a way that transforms them, which would then give you the copyright over that work, right? And a lot of people that have been in the community remember this. And to me, yesterday, when we started seeing all these posts pop up, well, I guess it's actually been like 2 or 3 days now. So it was like Thursday, Friday when this really started to heat up. I was getting a lot of vibes of that. And I know when I was dealing with the Canva stuff and we were talking about that, I went through and read the terms of service. And because I'm a little bit of a nerd, I can read between the lines on some of those things. And I wasn't getting that interpretation. And so I dug into the evidence here. And I wanted to take a look and just see what's going on. But before we did that, we did reach out to Etsy. I dug through all their support forums. I sent them an official press inquiry, right? All of the levers that we have to pull as just random people. They did open that email. They've yet to respond to that email. So, I don't know if we're not fancy enough for them or if they just don't have an answer either. But I did send them like 15 Facebook threads and all the YouTube videos and a bunch of other things saying, hey, can we clarify this for people? Because I'm sure your support teams are getting bombarded. And no sooner did I send that email, I jump over to Facebook and see all of the people posting screenshots of their support chat. So hopefully we'll get something out of that. But what Etsy has told us so far is essentially nothing. And so then we have to think through this logically and say, okay, is it likely to be the mockups? Or is it that we're getting into that like Canva loosely linked evidence of things that could make sense, but are counterintuitive, right? And I think somebody said in the comments, Scott, I think I read it earlier. If that is the conclusion we are to draw from this, that would be Etsy lighting their own business on fire.
100%.
Right? Not only would you be getting rid of mockups shops, essentially, because most of the people who are buying mockups on Etsy are buying mockups on Etsy to sell other things on Etsy. Yes, there's some people selling them on Shopify, whatever, but you lose that chunk of the market entirely from the platform. Yeah. You also lose all of the sellers that you're now banning for this with no warning, which is very unlike Etsy. You guys probably remember a few months ago, they were like, hey, we're changing the way that we do images. Go in and change your images, right? Like if this was a new thing that they were going to do, they wouldn't just spring that on people, especially as we're getting into the busiest time of the year. So that didn't really add up for me. And then the final thing is, if everybody that sells a t-shirt has to have the same picture on it, then you also shoot yourselves in the foot from a conversion rate standpoint, right? If Printify is the only person who can make a mock-up of a Bella Canvas 3001 t-shirt, then everybody that sells a Bella Canvas t-shirt on Etsy is going to have the same, essentially the same picture, and you're going to reduce conversion rate. So Etsy would be lighting money on fire by doing this, especially by doing this without warning people. So that, Scott, got you and I kind of thinking through this, and we said, all right, based on everything we're seeing, there's kind of 4 interpretations. The first one is that listings were incorrectly set up and they were listed as handmade, because we kept seeing a handmade violation pop up. And we'll get to that here in a second. It could be an IP Crackdown gone haywire. Or it could be, and this is something you alluded to a little bit earlier, inaccurate images. And that is also a way that you can interpret that line that everybody's saying, oh, it's definitely the mockups, is that the images don't accurately represent the product. What it's least likely to be is that Etsy is taking a weird stance on this policy and saying that no one can use mockups ever unless they come from Printify, right? And that to me is the least likely one. I'm still going to include it on here because it is the conclusion you could draw from the evidence. It's just not what you and I are seeing here. And so I wanted to walk through the 3 that we think it could be, give you guys a little bit of the evidence behind it, and then share our opinions on those. So the first one here, Scott, is that listings are incorrectly set up. And you guys may remember that line I showed a few minutes ago where it said, hey, you can't use other people's pictures, and that they were taking down people's listings. Most of the people I've seen that post a screenshot of that line coming to them from Etsy are leaving off the top half of that email. And this is the top half of that email. That email says, hello, this is the Etsy Trust and Safety team. Thank you for reaching out to us. We understand your desire to sell these products at a time when they are in high demand. However, please keep in mind that listings must be compliant with Etsy seller policies to be sold on our platform. I added the bolding here. To clarify, your items were removed for not meeting the criteria for what qualifies for sale on Etsy. Interesting, right? Maybe that's the mockups. Everything listed in our handmade category must be made or designed by you, the seller. That's not mockup, right? That is potentially a listing being set up incorrectly. And Scott, you and I talked a little bit about this yesterday. But one of the things that we see a lot is that people set up their print-on-demand listings and they do still list it as handmade, or they don't list a production partner. And so that may be playing into this. The other thing that could be happening there is they could be misinterpreting this as handmade if we take a look at the AI gone haywire theory here in a minute. But that leads me to the inaccurate images portion, right? If we take a look at the full Etsy listing image policy, not just that one line that everybody seems to keep highlighting over and over again, we can see that, like mockups for handmade would be a problem. And it very specifically says here, listing photos should be of a finished product made by you, right? It's handmade. You should have everything there. It's not hard to take your phone out and take a picture of it. Different handmade techniques produce different results. So it's important that your images accurately reflect the product that the buyer will receive. Mockups may be used for digital items because they correctly depict the item. So they're specifically saying there, without saying you can't use mockups, they're saying you can't use mockups because it's a physical item that you have created and they want a picture of it, right? We're not necessarily dealing with handmade items here though, because most of the people that are being affected with this are print on demand. So then we have to look at the personalized and the items made with production partners. And if we read the full policy there, it says, yes, that section that everybody keeps highlighting, image supplied by the production partner, must accurately depict the item, but sellers are responsible for ensuring the images properly represent their finished items. The first time that I saw this, I said, I see a lot of mockups. And Scott, I think you even said, you're like, it's a t-shirt. It's just a standard V-neck, but there's like a seam down it, or whatever. And it's not the same thing that people are getting. So that leads me to think that these people may have inaccurate mockups. So obviously the best way to get a correct mockup would be to go to Printify and use that one. But if you're buying something from an Etsy seller and you're selling a Bella Canvas 3001 t-shirt, and you're sure that that's what that is, there shouldn't be a reason that that wouldn't be okay based on reading this, as long as it accurately represents the item, right? So if we're dealing with just standard print on demand, we're printing the same design on everything, it doesn't sound like that would be the issue. Yes, you could theoretically interpret it that way, but that's not really how this has ever been interpreted. And it would also prohibit you as a seller from creating your own mockups by buying one t-shirt, you know, like folding it over a table, spending 10 minutes in Canva or a couple minutes in Photoshop, and then just swapping your design through it, because that would accurately represent the finished item, right? And a lot of the argument that I've seen against that is people saying, well, you know, if it doesn't accurately represent it on somebody that's a 3X or an extra, extra small, then that would be incorrect. No, what they're talking about is the style and the feel of the t-shirt and the image that's being printed on it, right? So obviously, if you have a t-shirt that has a pocket on it and your mockups don't have a pocket, then that doesn't accurately represent the product. So that leads me to think that it could be inaccurate images, right? The third thing on here is custom products. So if you're doing customization, would you get shut down for this? And if we read that policy, customization or products that are being customized should be the least impacted by this, even if it is the mockups, because they're basically saying, look, we get that you can't post a picture of every variation of every name inside your Etsy listing. So as long as you're doing that, as long as you have one image that accurately represents the final product, you can use computer-aided images. I love the legalese that's created in here. To create the rest of the images or to show what it might look like, right? You can use images created with the aid of software, maybe use in additional listing images to give buyers examples of customization options, right? So you could show them different ways that they could customize it without it having to be a fully accurate representation of what that end product would be. And the thought there, Scott, is like a necklace, right? Maybe you use a Photoshop to swap out the colors on beads or something. They're not expecting that bead to be the exact same thing that is being shipped because it's a custom product. And so if we think about this logically, if we take a little bit of a zoom out and instead of saying, well, it must be that one line, they do say in their terms of service that you can use or you should use an image provided by your production provider, then that, you know, it's definitely got to be that. But when we zoom out, it makes a lot more sense that it's probably not related to the concept of mockups itself, but rather something more like inaccurate images. And the last thing I wanted to point out on this, Scott, is their image policy was created and last updated November 27th, 2018. So
Right.
if they had made a change to this policy that has been in place for 5 years and did not update it in their seller policies, they'd be in huge legal problems. And two, it would just be bad business for them. And so this is the accurate policy. Yes, it's down a little bit to interpretation and how you want to interpret it. But to me, this kind of shoots that in the foot because this came out of nowhere. So to me, they would have been enforcing this over the last 5 years. Okay, let's not exaggerate. 4 years, 11 months, and 4 days. Right? Like this would have been enforced before Thursday of this week. And so that to me leads more to the thing, which is reading what these say to the letter, which is accurately portrayed. And if we take one step back here, we'll see under handmade, correctly depict, right? Properly represents, and also accurately depicts under items with production partners. And then the last one is basically, you know, as long as it's pretty close, if it's custom, you're fine, right? But that to me is really what stuck out when I started digging into this, because I've seen a lot of mockups that do not match the final product. It's just a generic t-shirt. Maybe it's a standard crew neck when they're selling a V-neck, or a V-neck when they're selling a crew neck, right? And so that to me lends a lot of credence to this interpretation. The other interpretation that I wanted to spend a minute talking about was the IP detection gone haywire. And this is something you and I talked about. And this could have an implication on the images. And if we remember back to that handmade policy, Scott, that email that people kept getting that said, don't use other people's photos, right? Like you can't use other people's photos, essentially what it said. If they're doing some sort of image detection and misclassifying what are mockups as other people's stuff, then that could be what's leading to this, right? And so to me, this one has a lot of credence here as well, because it's something we've been talking about heavily. It's something that's been really going on lately. You guys might remember, if you've been in the Etsy ecosystem for 10 months at this point, I guess 8 months at this point, back in February, some random research firm did a little bit of random research on Etsy, and they said it's just full of copyright infringing junk and whatever. And their stock took a huge tumble at the beginning of the year, right about the time that they were getting ready to release their Q4 numbers. And it was not a happy time for Etsy. And so right after that happened, Etsy really started cracking down on IP. And if you guys have been hanging out with us for any period of time, you may remember that Scott did a video a few months back about how everybody's using Taylor Swift stuff in their store, and how Taylor Swift was coming after Etsy sellers, not her herself, but all of the million people around her, and maybe Travis Kelce, who knows? But then even just yesterday, Scott, before we really started diving into this, you'd published another video on the channel about Etsy really cracking down on copyright and trademark issues. And so to me, one thing that would make a lot of sense is that in order to do this, what they are doing is they are looking at the images and they're saying, hey, this image is showing up over and over and over again, and somebody didn't write the code correctly or whatever. And if they're seeing that image over and over and over again, then they are flagging it as a potential IP violation because you're taking somebody's stuff. And the piece of evidence that popped up, and I don't know how long this has been in here, Scott, but the first time I noticed it was the other day, was they now have a thing in your listing creation that specifically says, make sure you don't use stock images or photos you find on the internet, right? Which tells me that they are going to start looking at those things. Not necessarily that you have to use the Printify mockup and your store is going to get shut down if you don't use that, but that if something feels out of place for them, then you might get flagged for it. And to me, that lends a lot of credence to the the AI bot going crazy, because they wanted to test some of the IP image detection and it just went bonkers, right? That's a possibility. And to me, that's a higher possibility, a much stronger possibility than them just saying, can't ever use a mockup if it's not directly from Printify, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm curious in the chat, who thinks that this is some type of AI detection thing that Etsy rolled out that is flagging certain accounts or certain listings? I'm curious who thinks this is an AI detection thingy going on. I don't know, to be honest with you. I don't think any of us know, but I'm just curious. I think there's probably some AI stuff going on. I'm not sure what the detection is. There's some speculation out there with, whether it's how you set up your listing to the images that you're using and all of that. I will tell you, like right this second, we, knock on wood, have not received anything, and we have used mockups that we've purchased of the item. Okay. So are we panicking right now? No. Are we a little nervous? Of course. Who wouldn't be? Right. But the way I look at it is, as long as our product is the mockup, right? Not a digital created t-shirt, by the way, right? A mockup that someone shot on a model. It's the same make, model, all of that, right? I don't see as that being the problem. The other thing I will say, and we'll dive into this a little bit further, but I also feel like there's more to it than just the mockup, as far as either you have been warned before or you have had listings that were dinged before. Things like that, I think, also could be coming into this, because I did a video probably about a month ago now where Etsy came out and said, hey, we're going to be helping you sellers this Q4. And one of the things that we're going to be doing to help you is we're going to be cracking down on infringing products and all of that stuff, right? We're going to be doing that. And we were all like, yes, right? Finally, you're going to be taking down the people that are selling Taylor Swift stuff, or people that are selling Disney stuff, right? That stuff, or people that are copying, which just happened to my wife. Someone blatantly ripped off the design and basically then started selling it, right? And even did it on Amazon, took it, started selling it over on Amazon. And then we had to report them and all of that stuff. So Etsy clearly said that about a month ago, that that's what they were going to start to do. Well, it sounds like whether it's an AI detection or whatever, there's something happening right now with them saying, okay, you said this was handmade, or you said this was created with a production partner. Okay, right? Does it meet these guidelines, or did you check all of those boxes correctly, or did you add the image that represents the product of the product that you're selling? And I do think it has something to do with maybe people have had complaints on their account that they got the item and they're like, this doesn't look like the picture, right? And now you've got a problem because now they're getting dinged, and then Etsy's getting someone contacting them saying like, hey, one of your sellers is selling something that's not actually in the same as the picture. That could be happening, right? So you have to also put this through your filter of common sense, right? Like, and I'm not saying it always falls in there, because Etsy can sometimes do things that don't fall within the common sense thing. You're like, what, really? But the one thing I will say, Chris, that we've been seeing and that we've been hearing, anyone that has been dinged, anyone that has been shut down has had warnings, has had their listing said, hey, you've got a handmade violation. You need to fix it or you can't sell. And then they go ahead and they might update their mockups because they're like, well, let me just change the mockups because the mockups were ones that I AI generated or ones that I purchased that were AI generated, right? Just because you didn't create them AI doesn't mean that someone else didn't, right? So that could be the case.
I think that's a big one and it could be a combination of these things. And Scott, I wanted to ask you, out of those 4 options, so listings being set up incorrectly, meaning they were somehow not marked the way that a print-on-demand listing is supposed to mark, because there's like 4 things you're supposed to fill out. An IP crackdown going haywire, and I want to talk more about that one here in a minute. Images not accurately representing the product, or the fact that Etsy is now interpreting this in a different way than they've been interpreting this policy for the last 5 years. Which of those things is the most likely from a common sense perspective? And is it one or a combination of those things?
It could be a combination, but I think it's 2 and 3. I definitely think that it is a whether it's copyright, trademark, or just violating, just taking an image from Canva and slapping it on a t-shirt and calling that your design, right? That it could be a Disney crackdown. It could be Taylor Swift or all of the country stars out there that people are ripping off, or certain sayings for movies or any of that stuff. That could be happening. And it could be the third thing that you mentioned, I believe it was the third thing, was kind of like an AI detection thing where they're like, and I mean their AI, where it's going in and it's looking at certain images, or it's looking at your product image and going like, whoa, that's infringing. Let's flag that. That could be. I don't think it's as much as an internal, like they're looking at the checkboxes that you did when you're setting up your listing. Again, I'm speculating, I'm guessing just like everyone else, but my common sense meter says that's probably at 2 and 3.
So I think for me, for the, like, you can't use mockups that don't come from Printify, and Etsy out of nowhere is interpreting this policy differently than they have for the last 5 years. And I even went back in the Wayback Machine just to make sure that their like stupid date at the bottom didn't forget to update or something. And they only had back to 2020, but it's been the same for at least the last 3 years. And according to their legally binding page, it's been that way since November of 2018. The mockups thing seems to be the least of it. What I think this potentially is a combination of the other 3 reasons, right? If you guys have never dealt with seller support on another platform like Facebook or Amazon, you may not be aware that you never get a clear answer and everything is a form response, right? Scott, you have seen the form responses I got from Facebook that were like, yeah, you definitely violated one of our policies. Yeah, what policy is it? I don't know. Go read our terms of service.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, I didn't violate that, or that. So I don't know what, yeah, you definitely violated one of them. Well, which one, right? You played that circular game. And if you look at that Etsy email, any listing that got flagged for any reason for a handmade violation would potentially get a version of that email that says, hey, it was taken down for handmade. And oh, by the way, don't steal other people's pictures, right? So it might be the pictures. It might be that it was miscategorized. What I actually think is going on here is that Etsy is trying to really cover their butts for Q4 this year. They had that article come out right before they announced their numbers. It tanked their stock. They're in the busiest portion of the year, meaning they're making the most money, which also for them, from a corporate perspective, means they have the most liability right now. If somebody lists a Taylor Swift thing right now and they let them get away with it, they're potentially on the hook legally for more because there's more being gained by the seller of that item because they're making more sales right now than they would in February, right? And so what I think happened here is some sort of combination of, one, a misunderstanding, two, there's potentially some people that have been posting about this that did not send their print on demand items up correctly. And then I think 3 and 4, so the IP crackdown gone haywire. I think what they're doing is they're getting really aggressive on trademarks and copyrights. And we saw this with Shine On, right?
Yep.
They're cracking down on drop shipping. They've really been cracking down on Taylor Swift, on Disney, on some of those kinds of things. I see people posting about Shania Twain, right? Like there's Shania Twain stuff all over the place. They are cracking down all over the place from an intellectual property perspective. What is an easy piece of intellectual property that they can crack down on? Images. Why? Because images are indexed. And although AI is not really good enough at this point, although it's getting there, to tell you what is inside of a picture, they can tell you if a picture pretty much matches, right? So you can do image detection, and there's actually programs where you can run images that you've created through them to see if they show up anywhere on the internet. And even if they're modified slightly, it's still going to show up. So if it's a mock-up that maybe somebody didn't own the rights to when they published it on Etsy, even if it's a popular one, they technically can't sell you that mock-up. And if it's just a photo that they're seeing over and over and over again that they didn't recognize as a mock-up because they didn't think about it in the image recognition process when they were creating the little AI bot to go look at it, that would trigger it. But to me, all of those are a little bit more realistic than saying they're somehow interpreting a policy in a way that they never interpreted a policy before. So to me, I lean towards the combination of listings not being set up correctly and a massive intellectual property crackdown that's kind of gone a little far because they didn't account for some things potentially. And so with that in mind, Scott, like,
yeah,
what do we actually do about it? What do we do? And it appears, right, the easy solution, especially if we take it's definitely the mock-ups approach. And Jessica, who was one of the people who got hit with this early on, did get her store back. She said, I went in and thankfully she only had 10 listings that were affected. And that's something else I want to talk about. She went in, swapped them out, and then appealed and was then granted her store back. Right. And so to me, she didn't get her store banned. Those listings were just deactivated. And that's probably because she didn't have issues before. The few posts that I've seen where people said that their store was shut down, they were like, yeah, this is my 3rd time with a handmade violation, right? Well, Etsy's going to start to take that more and more seriously. But in this case, her swapping those images out did work for her. So is it the mockups? I don't think it is, because even doing that, right? And somebody had said, well, if a human being was looking at it, somebody in the comments said, well, if a human being was looking at it after they got this AI flag, if that was the case, then they definitely would have approved the appeal. First of all, these people are dealing with thousands of things. Second of all, you can give them all of the evidence that you created the mockup yourself and they can still make the wrong decision, right? But I think probably what's happening, if it is that like AI checker where they're looking to see if the images match other images in their database, her swapping that out, then when the person does the review, they're not going to see that that is an image on the list of things that is copywritten that they can't be used in that environment, and go ahead and do that.
But Chris, I'm gonna push on this a little bit because I know people would be thinking this if they're looking at this, right? So Jessica writes, update for anyone following the mockup saga. I updated my listings by removing all mockups except the Printify ones, and this morning they reinstated my account. So I would immediately see that and I'd go, oh, it was the mockups. So I guess I can only use Printifys. So now that's what we're assuming, right? Or someone would assume. Then all of a sudden they tell someone in a Facebook group, and then that, the campfire story, right? We all kind of talk and we kind of spread the story, and it just keeps getting bigger and then bigger and bigger. And then by the time you get done, it's not even close to what it was originally. But this one here, this is just I look at it as a rumor starter that we don't know if that is actually, it's just, to me, you went in and these could have been AI generated images that didn't represent the product. And then you just put them in there. They just happen to be Printifys. And then all of a sudden they reinstated it. So you're like, oh, that's the answer. It's the mockups. We don't know that. The other thing is, Chris, and I don't know if you were able to, I think you were emailing with her back and forth or messaging back and forth with Jessica. Is this the lady?
Yeah.
Okay.
She's the one that gave me the full email.
Yeah. Cause I would want to know more about, okay, I know probably you don't want to reveal what you were selling, but was what you were selling, was it trademarked? Was it a violation of something else? And then you going in and changing things because now maybe you showed off, something that you shouldn't have, or maybe it didn't represent the product the way that it should have, and now it did? Or I would like to know more on the actual shop and the listing and all of those things, because I think there's more to the story than just it being, oh, it was the mock-up.
Well, and that's actually a few things that have come up, right? Like if that's the assumption that we have coming into this, we change the mockups and then we get that feedback, well, then it must be the mockups. But if it wasn't that to begin with, or the people who did appeal this and got banned just had a terrible seller support rep, also possible, right? It could be if she had just appealed this before she changed the mockups, that they also would have given her store back because it didn't otherwise violate policy. And they're aware internally that this is some sort of a crackdown gone wrong. And they would just greenlight her anyway, right? So because she changed the mockups and got approved on appeal, we're not quite sure. But there were some people, I believe, that commented on that post. And I think I have to go back and look, but a few people asked, hey, was it that you were using AI mockups? And she's like, I'm not really sure where I got it. I bought it from somebody on Etsy. So that to me is an indicator that it might not be the fact that she was using a mockup that didn't come from Printify. It might be that mockup did not represent the mug, right? If it is a square mug and her mockup is round, then that's potentially an issue, right? And if they know that that is a thing, and this is another possibility that goes into the IP crackdown thing, right? That the mockup store didn't have the rights to that image to begin with, and the IP holder complained to Etsy. Whoever created that image that they created the mockup from complained to Etsy, and then Etsy went through and took down everybody with that image. Scott, the Comfort Colors t-shirt, the girl like sitting in the Comfort Colors t-shirt, that's one I keep seeing pop up over and over again. And there are people like, yeah, this just popped up on Temu. It's popping up in all these places. So it's possible. And that is something I've seen being sold over and over again as a mock-up on Etsy. It is possible that the IP holder, whoever created that image, complained to Etsy and said, you guys don't have the rights to just keep selling this all over the place. And then they added that into their little AI detector, and it went and took down all of the people that were using that, right? That is also a possibility. And so what we really have to think about here is what makes the most sense and what do we want to do about it? And we're basically left with three options at this point. If we have mockups in our store, we can either get rid of all of our mockups and switch to just Printify, which if you have 5 listings or 10 listings, like in the slide that we were just looking at, is not that big of a deal. But if you have hundreds or thousands of listings, could become a giant pain in your butt and a very long weekend this weekend. We can just wait and see, or we can do something in between. We could go replace the mockups on our top selling products and leave the ones we don't really care about alone. So Scott, I wanted to get your thoughts on this before we kind of open it up for whatever questions people have. If you were an average seller here, well, actually, let me just ask you, what is your plan based on what we've seen so far?
Yeah, right now, honestly, we are using some mockups, but they represent the product. So we made sure of that from day one, because we didn't want anyone buying something and then coming back and going like, oh, it doesn't look like that. And there's been some times where it's like, that blanket looks close, but it's not the blanket. We don't use that. So we're only going to use, and we're not going to use it if it's AI generated, like a sweatshirt that looks like the sweatshirt, but not really is the sweatshirt. Like it's just too perfect. You know what I mean? Like you want the waves in it the right way and all of that stuff. Right. So what we're doing is we're just keeping things the way that they are. I'm not touching anything. I'm not going to go in and change settings. I'm not going to go in and change a whole bunch of mockups. I'm definitely not going to put it in vacation mode. Like anyone that's putting it in vacation mode, I don't know. I would be so nervous with that, because you're losing ranking, you're losing sales velocity, you're losing all of that stuff heading into Q4. So I don't know. But us personally, we're just going to carry on as usual. We know just from what we've learned that you're normally going to get a warning, right? You're going to be warned that you've been violating something, right? And we haven't gotten anything, knock on wood, but are we, concerned? Obviously, because we know that just from, before we used to sell on Amazon, we had a pretty good sized brand on Amazon, and we've had issues, right? Where you get your account suspended until you show them proof of your item and, pictures and things like that. So we understand that it can happen even if you're doing everything on the up and up. But for us, it's business as usual. I mean, literally my wife's still creating products, still uploading, still using mockups. Like that's what we're doing. Okay. Now, side note, what we're also doing, and we have been doing, is we also have set up a Shopify store, right? We've got that thing up and running. So if something should happen, we could start driving, ads over there. And it's something we've been wanting to do anyway. So it kind of gave us a little bit of a kick in the butt. But we got that thing up and running, and we're going to be probably working on that a little bit, but we're not going to panic in a sense of we're going to start changing a whole bunch of stuff. And if we get a warning, we'll go ahead and deal with it, and I'll report it here. Like that's all that I can say. But I do have other, friends, and I have students, and I have not received anything from anyone saying my account got hit or my account got dinged. And if it did, I would be able to do more digging, because either it's a student or it's a friend of mine that I could get to the bottom of it and say, okay, well, that's probably why, right? It's not the mock-up. So, yeah.
And people in the chat are just saying they should put out a statement and give us some time to conform. And that's kind of our point, is like, if they were changing the way that they were interpreting this policy, if it wasn't some sort of like IP crackdown, or that the images weren't right for the product that people were purporting to sell, which would be pretty easy to do. Because you can put in, square mug or whatever, and you can teach a computer what a square mug is. And if the listing images are round, then you could auto flag it, right? Like, this is not rocket surgery from a computer image standpoint, a computer vision standpoint, at least in 2023 as of recording this. They would have put out a statement if they made a change like that. And just like they did with the images, if they had changed their policy, the policy would have been updated on the website. If they were somehow interpreting it differently, they wouldn't just be taking people's stores offline. And that's also not what we're seeing. That's the big rumor, is like, if you don't change your mockups right now, they're going to take your store offline. The worst thing that seems to be happening, unless you're otherwise having issues, is that they're taking that listing down. If that happens to you, then you could change the mockup back to the stock Printify mockup and appeal that conclusion. Where people are running into issues, Scott, and I'm curious if your strategy would change if you had gotten a handmade policy violation or a previous IP policy violation for you or for your wife, if that would change your like wait and see approach to this.
Well, yeah, obviously, because then I would have data. I know what we're doing. I don't know what you're doing, right? And I don't mean you, like, I don't mean you watching right now. Like, I just mean anyone in general, right? You have to know the whole story of the people that are getting shut down and dinged. And how many is it, right? Like, we hear that it's a lot, but how many is it? I would love a grand total. I would love to know a total in the last month. How many people were shut down or dinged because of mock-ups? Like, I would love to know who thinks that's the reason why they got shut down. And then I would love to go into the data and go, okay, like, what happened? Like, let's look at your store. Let's look at your mockups. Let's see, let's kind of reverse engineer like what possibly could have flagged, right? And that's why we're doing this too, by the way, guys. I'm hoping that there's some of you that, well, I don't hope that you guys have run into this, but maybe you know someone that ran into this, and you can forward it to us so we can go ahead and do more investigative work. So this way here, we can uncover it and unpack it, unless I can get someone from Etsy. And if someone is connected in Etsy, has a way for us to get an Etsy rep, please, please, please share this and contact us or contact them and let them know. Like, it would be so easy if Etsy would just have someone step in the front, like, and do a press conference and go, listen, this is what it is. Don't read me the script that's already there in the terms of service. Tell us exactly what you're doing. If you're testing AI to basically go after infringing, images or infringing design or any of that stuff, let us know. Let us know that you did an experiment and it failed and it's aggressive right now. Like, just let us know. But I agree with everyone. And it's the same. Someone had messaged, is it as crazy selling on Amazon? Yeah, it's probably a little crazier, to be honest with you. It's absolutely crazy. I've seen people making $30,000 to $75,000 a month and get shut off like that and don't get any explanation other than, here's the terms of service, here's what we feel you violated, but it doesn't really tell you what you violated. There's like 10 things in there that you could have violated. They don't just go out there and say, this is what you did, right? And so the grass isn't greener on the other side. The other thing I will say too, and a lot of people are like, that's why I'm going to leave Etsy and I'm going to go on Shopify. And that's fine. I think that everyone should eventually go on Shopify because it's your own platform. But what you have to also realize is you are having to be 100% the marketer right now, right? And I saw one lady the other day. She's like, I signed up to sell on Etsy. I didn't sign up to be a marketer. I hate to tell you, but you got to have a little bit of marketer in you, because if you don't, you can't just hand it off to a company like Etsy and go, here, sell my stuff. Yes, but you still got to do your marketing, right? And so if you're going to go on Shopify and someone just said, like Shopify scares me because I got to then deal with all the sales tax stuff. Yep, you do. You do. But there's tools and stuff that help you with all of that stuff that you could easily do that. Years ago, the one I used for Amazon was called Tax Jar, and they handled a lot of it for you. You still had to do the submission and everything. It's still a pain in the butt, but there are options. But you have to also understand the grass isn't always greener on the other side. So yes, we're dealing with this, but we're trying to do this right now so people come forward and share their experience. So this way here, we can have more knowledge. You guys know knowledge is power, right? If we can all kind of come together and figure this thing out, we can help each other. And that's what we're doing here. That's why I'm here on a Saturday afternoon. Chris is here on a Saturday afternoon. 418 people on here right now. So obviously you guys, like we're a group, like we're a community of people. So if we can kind of come together and help each other, I think we can get through this and we can be better from it. And also you can admit that maybe you crossed the line. The video I did, what was it? Friday it came out, and a lady came forward and she did a whole video on it and said basically she got shut down because she was violating trademark, and she was warned numerous times. And she knew she was doing wrong. Maybe sometimes we have to just admit, like, okay, maybe my images aren't like 100% mine, or I think they are, but maybe someone else did AI on the mockups. And now you're using an AI generated mockup that they didn't own and you don't own. Like, we don't know. We need to figure out everything behind this that we can. And that's why we have spent so much time digging through all of these responses and all of these comments. So please blow up the comments. If we get this thing big enough, we might be able to get Etsy's attention, right? So let's do that. All right. Maybe we do like hashtag Etsy help or something. I don't know. We got to do something.
I want people to take a few different things away from this, Scott. The first one would be, right, we have to, anytime something like this happens, we have to take a step back and think through this from a common sense perspective. Could it be that Etsy has a new interpretation of this policy? Yes. Is that the likely interpretation? No. Will I shave my eyebrows if Etsy comes out a week from now and says that it's the mockups? Also no, but I'm more than willing to admit that I'm wrong and that they changed the interpretation of that policy and shot themselves in the foot at the most important part of the year. But we also have to use a little bit of Occam's razor, right? What's more likely on this? And when we combine what's been going on in Etsy with what's happening right now, it's probably some sort of trademark copyright infringement thing gone wrong, or an image recognition thing gone wrong, or a combination of one of those two things and people using mockups that aren't the actual product, right? Or mockups that they bought on Etsy that seller didn't actually have the right to create mockups from, and somebody else complained. So to me, a lot of this stuff comes back to copyright and trademark. And I know if you've been hit by this, having this long form conversation doesn't necessarily help you. But for everybody else, Scott, because one of the things that I was seeing yesterday is like, I'm done with Etsy. I didn't sign up, I didn't sign up to be stressed out. I didn't sign up for this. I'm done. I'm leaving. I'm just going to port over to Shopify. Rather than having that attitude, Sabrina says, Etsy, shave your eyebrows. Rather than having that attitude, if we sit back, take a deep breath, which is really hard to do when you're kind of in this panic. And that's part of the reason, Scott, you and I wanted to do this live, and say, what is the likely reason? Okay. How do I protect myself against that? If it is the other dumb version of this interpretation, like if Etsy is shooting themselves in the foot, how do I protect myself from it? And if it's not that, but Etsy decides to shoot themselves in the foot in the future, how do I protect myself from that? And I would say, rather than taking the time right now, unless you've otherwise had an IP violation in the past, rather than going in and immediately changing all of your product images because you read a Facebook thread where somebody said that their account got shut down for no reason, or their account got shut down because they were using a mockup that didn't come directly from Printify, I'd rather see you take that time to start building the skills and things that you need to be immune from stupidity that can happen on platforms. So while I don't think this is an example of that stupidity, I think it's a mistake. Stupidity does happen, and we've seen it happen over and over again. Facebook makes changes that make no sense. Amazon makes changes that go against their best interest. Etsy at some point will make changes that go against their best interest. So how do we protect against that? We build our own land, and we're not 100% dependent on the platform. Getting started and building things on Etsy is a great way to get started. You're at the best time of the year. You're going to make more money now for most people than you would throughout the rest of the year. But let's take that same amount of time, energy, and effort that we would be dedicating like this weekend for everybody to do that, to go in and change all of our images, to learn a little bit about email marketing, to try to understand a little bit more about how to build a Shopify website or a WooCommerce website, or to even just go start one of those things. So that if Etsy does something dumb down the road and shuts our shop down for no reason, which we've yet to see any evidence that that's ever happened, but for literally no reason, that we have a leg to stand on. Scott, this is the conversation you and I were having yesterday, where we said we're kind of going to double down on some of the Shopify stuff. We have a Shopify site. We're not really using it that much because we like driving our traffic back to Etsy. It converts higher than it would otherwise. But if we go in and do a little bit of cleanup, then we're safe regardless of what this is. And where I think I'd like a lot of people to start focusing, especially if they've been selling on Etsy, is on that email list. And if you can start by building that email list, which you can do very easily in like 10 minutes, right now, you could go to aweber.com and connect it, or you can go over to Everbee and wait, that's going to be coming in the next few weeks, right? And get that hooked up and have them pour over the customers that you already have. That's a starting block. And if you can master outside traffic and driving that back to Etsy, then if they ever do something stupid, you turn your Shopify store on and you just change where the traffic is going. And Scott, this gives me a reminder of 2018. I believe we did an emergency call back in 2018 at like 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night about product reviews and how everybody was saying, oh, it's the end of Amazon. Well, Amazon's still around. People are still making tons of money selling private label, selling their own products on Amazon. That it was just a change to the process. And we had very similar advice on that call 5 years ago, right about the time that Etsy wrote their product image policy. We had a very same conversation, which was basically, look, this isn't what you think it is. It's probably not what you think it is. Let's take a step back. Let's take a deep breath and let's focus on the long-term vision of this rather than the panic of the moment, which is very easy to be overwhelmed by. What are the things that we can do to prevent something dumb from happening if somebody makes a dumb decision, right? And we had a lot of people saying earlier, well, if it's not just the mock-ups, then everybody who appealed would be approved. And I can tell you, as somebody who's dealt with a lot of seller support people, it doesn't matter what evidence you put in there. They might not approve it if you're flagged for some reason because they're not reading it. They don't care. Their reading of the policy is different from your reading of the policy and the actual policy. It doesn't matter. It's up to them and it's up to the click of a button. And if we can be more resilient than that by having our own customer list, by thinking about not necessarily taking the time, energy, and effort away from Q4 sales on Etsy, but starting to think about what an external website would look like for our brand and making sure that we have some of those things in place so that if the chair is pulled out from under us, we have something to stand on.
I'm glad that you brought that up because, you know, a lot of people I've been reading through the threads and just like, oh, I'm going to go to Shopify or I'm going to start my own website. I think I think that's a good idea, but I also think like your email list is like the number one thing, because if you have your email list and then you set up your Shopify, you have people to push them over. If you get locked out of your Etsy account, you have no access to those emails and using the emails, right? So I would definitely recommend, and I just gave this out the other day. If you guys want to grab our playbook, it's free. There's no agenda here other than to give you a free resource. And yes, you will, hear from us in the future on other stuff about email and things. But if you want to go to brandcreators.com/email, you can go there and download. It's like 45 pages, something like that. And it goes through how we use email. I just did a post the other day in one of the Facebook groups. We've driven in the last 30 days around $2,600 in sales just from email. And that's over to Etsy. Now I could have did the same thing and drove that over to my own website because I pointed the traffic, right? I just used my share and save link that they're giving out now, right, to give us credit. And then they, I think we made an extra $100 in fees that we didn't have to pay. So if you guys are interested in grabbing that, again, it's free. Brandcreators.com/email. And you can go ahead and get yourself a copy of that. So that's there for you. I would definitely start on email. We are going to be doing another workshop actually in about 2 weeks now, maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks at the end of the month. And it's going to be all about email. We actually scheduled to do that before any of this happened. So it's just kind of coincidence. But we're going to be doing that at the end of the month. It is a free workshop. So we're going to do that for free. And it is going to be talking about Everbee, because Everbee is rolling out a new email program that I'm beta testing right now. I'm poking a whole bunch of holes in it, sending out emails, and I'm testing it, and we're working the bugs out. But it's going to be a game changer for getting reviews and for getting more sales and building a customer list. If you guys are, who's using Everbee right now? I'd be curious to see in the comments who's using Everbee right now. I'm just curious. Just go ahead and drop that in the comments. I could drop another link too in there, Chris, that if people are not yet using Everbee and they wanted to use Everbee and get a discount, I can throw that in there too. So if you go to emailforshops.com, you can sign up and get 50% off of your first 2 months with Everbee. So if you want to go and check that out, go for it. It's just emailforshops.com. So just go there and you can go ahead and get 2 months for the cost of one. Email's coming. It should be ready by November 1st, I believe. October 31st, I think, is the official launch date. Again, fingers crossed. We're refining some things in the tool, but it's supposed to be ready by then. And we're going to do a free workshop for that as well. So if you're interested, emailforshops.com. And if you want to get our email playbook, go to brandcreators.com/email. Chris, I know the comments are blowing up. We still got 386 people on with us here live. Do we have any questions that we wanted to address? Does anybody have any questions that they wanted to ask while they got us here?
Yeah, so I think it was Suzanne, and again, they're like flying past me here. Suzanne had said, well, Shopify can remove listings too, so what's the point of that? We're using Shopify as an example of an external platform. It could be WooCommerce, Wix, wherever.
Yep.
And yes, you could get shut down there, but again, you'd have to be violating their terms of service, and it's less likely that that's going to happen, that you get shut down both places for somebody doing something dumb. If you're breaking the law, right, that's a different question, versus Etsy changing how they interpret their image policy and deciding that all of your listings are somehow in a violation of a policy that it hasn't been in a violation of for the last 5 years and they haven't actually changed, but somebody new came in on their legal team and decided that that's what that word means now. I had to get that out all in one breath, right? You can't ever prevent that. So we try to shore up against that. Shopify would be one way of doing that. We just use that as the example because it's the most approachable for other people. You could hand code your own website and run it off of a server in your bedroom and never have to worry about anybody ever taking it down, if that's your thing. But what we're really talking about is being more approachable. And the more legs that we have to stand on, the harder it is to knock the stool out from under us. And I think it was Silver, Gold, and something else had said a couple different times. They've commented a bunch here today, and they said, you know, I had a brick and mortar in Mexico and had no way of getting in contact with my clients. I lost the brick and mortar because of some of the stupid stuff that's going on in Mexico, and lost my entire business because I lost a physical location. You should absolutely have more than one way of getting in contact with people, right? And the easiest approach to that for most people is going to be the email list, because you don't have to learn how to master Facebook ads. You don't have to learn Google ads. You can just learn how to write a couple lines of text and be able to point that fire hose of traffic, whether it's to Etsy, to your own website, however you want to build that, right? And so my suggestion would be that if you aren't diversified, to go do that. We have a lot of people asking us. Go ahead.
Hold on one second. A bunch of people came in late. Can you just give a quick summary of kind of like what's going on and kind of like what we're going to be doing moving forward? Can you just maybe go ahead and cut to that real quick?
Yeah. So the quick recap would be that everybody in the Etsy community is kind of freaking out the last few days because a bunch of sellers have been taken down, and they think that it is linked to the product mockups that they were using, that they weren't using the exact mockups from Printify. Based on all of the evidence that we've seen, that doesn't appear to be the case. It's much more likely that Etsy is doing something in the copyright trademark infringement realm that got a little bit out of hand, or that the images that they are using do not accurately represent the product, which would be a much bigger problem than using a mockup that you created versus the mockup that Printify created. So basically, a lot of people are worried that their entire store is going to get shut down because of something that they don't necessarily have control over, or because they didn't use Printify's mockup because they liked Placeit better, or they bought one on Etsy. does not appear to be the case. What appears to be the case is that there's a little bit, or a lot of it, I guess, Scott, of misinterpretation and a little bit of something that kind of got out of hand over on Etsy's back end. The good news is it does look like as long as you are accurately creating your listings, accurately listing your images and all of those kinds of things, that even if you do get caught up in this, that they are able to review that and reverse that, at least for some people at this point. So
cool. All right, good. All right, cool. Let's answer some questions. We're all still here, 383 of us anyway. Let's go ahead and I love it. And you can wear PJs all day long. LOL. Yeah, that's the cool thing about working from home, right? You got any queued up there, Chris?
Yeah. Is it illegal for me to not report counterfeit listings if I see them? No, it's not illegal, because you don't know what the licensing is anyway, right? And that's somebody, Scott, on the video yesterday said, well, there's thousands of people selling Disney stuff, so I don't know why anybody's images could possibly be a copyright infringement. One, just because other people are doing it doesn't mean that you should. And Scott, I don't know if your father ever said this to you, but my father said this to me quite often, probably only second to my mother, which was, if all your friends jumped off a bridge, would you jump off the bridge too, just because? Right? Like,
ours was Joe Blow down the road. Our guy was Joe Blow down the road. Hey, if Joe Blow down the road did that, would you do it?
Yeah, like just because, or is there an actual reason, or are you just doing it because everybody else is doing it? There's no good reason to do it. But some of the people selling Disney stuff are allowed to sell Disney stuff, right? Some of them do have a license to do it. Most of them, based on what I've seen, probably don't. But if you know that somebody is counterfeiting something, you should report it, because it helps everybody and it helps us avoid crazy things getting out of hand, especially if it's your own design. Absolutely report it and get that
Chris,
taken care of.
Do you remember years ago on Amazon? So guys, if you guys are just tuning in, like Chris and I have sold on Amazon quite a bit. Actually, we built a brand with another partner and ended up selling. And it was a good size brand. We ran it for like 3.5, 4 years. And we started another brand before that. So we have experience selling on Amazon, a lot of experience. But this happened almost identically in a different way. So there was a thing going on that you couldn't put badges in your pictures, right? Your picture had to be only of the product, right? And that's it. You couldn't have in there like 30-day money back guarantee or free shipping, or you couldn't have anything in there. But people were doing it all day long, every day. But did we do it? No, we didn't. Because people were getting shut down from it. They were getting their listings deactivated. They were getting suspensions. They were getting all this stuff, but people were still doing it, right? So to me, it looks like the same thing. You're going to go, well, some people are still using AI mockups. Why can't I? Well, you're running the risk of getting slapped, maybe. Don't know, right? Oh, some people are selling Taylor Swift stuff. Why can't I? They might be, but they could get slapped. They could get shut down overnight. Right? So just because you see it being done does not mean you're not next in line, right? So to me, I've always operated just like with building websites. I've built plenty of websites. I still have many websites that we build, content sites. Backlinking in the day and even today is really popular for getting a website to rank. Are we doing backlinking? No. Why? Because there's been penalties by Google rolled out that takes your site from page 1 to page 1,000 overnight. Right? This stuff has been happening. We've been in this world of online business for over 20 years now. And so this has been happening. So all I'm saying is just because you see someone else doing it does not mean that you are okay to do it or are approved to do it, right? It just means they haven't gotten caught yet or someone hasn't turned them in yet. Okay. So just understand what you see on there does not mean that it's okay. And yes, we can all agree. We all agree right now that Etsy allowing that to even happen, it's a simple fix. Because actually, Amazon did this too back in the day. If you had a brand name in the title, you were flagged immediately. You couldn't even post the listing. It was done. Or if it did go through, you would get something the next morning and say, sorry, all in red, you're basically flagged and you have to get rid of your title. This is your warning, right? So you just have to understand that this has been happening, but if you know that you're not supposed to be doing it, and even though Etsy is allowing it, does not mean that it's okay. All right. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking of like riding the line. Okay. And again, I just did a video. I'll link it up in the description once we're done here. And you can check that out. I shot it Friday of a lady that and she shared her whole story on how she knew she was doing something wrong, but kind of saw everybody else doing it. And then was doing like $6,000-7,000 a month. And then bingo, gone. And she's banned for life. Can't sell on Etsy anymore. Bye-bye. Now she's got to go do Shopify, which is fine, right? One door closes, another one opens. That's the way I look at it, right? But it sucks. All right. So, all right. I think I went on a little bit of a tangent there, but that's okay. That's what I do. And it's a Saturday afternoon.
John said there's something fishy about stores that have been infringing for years, like 5 to 10 years. Well, you don't know if they're infringing or if they actually have the rights to sell those things. You can always report them and find out. But yeah, I mean, there is arguments on both sides, and we're not saying that Etsy is an angel when it comes to IP stuff. Like,
no,
if you're looking at this from the greedy capitalist perspective, right? If you are Etsy, the entity, and you go, I'm making millions of dollars selling Disney stuff. How keen are they to sue us about that? Maybe we let it slide for a little bit, right? That's how you turn into Enron. But this is just one of those things where it's like, yeah, some of those people are going to slip through the cracks. Are they getting stricter about it? Yes. Why? Because they have external pressure. And that, I think, is really what's coming to head right now, Scott. They had that external pressure last year of them getting their Q4 numbers analyzed, and Etsy starting to get noticed by Taylor Swift and Disney and some of these other people who were saying, hey, you're like taking millions of dollars a year from us. Maybe we're going to come after you for it if you don't start to crack down. So they are starting to roll out more and more protections. And that to me is the most realistic explanation of what's going on right now. It's one of those things. Somebody had said in the comments, Scott, it was Sabrina, said, if they're all jumping off a cliff and I don't know why they are, I might go because I don't know what they're jumping away from. And to me, that's an option, right? But also, we should know what's on the other side of that cliff.
Yeah.
And we should know what they're jumping away from.
Right.
And if I'm the slowest person who makes the right decision by not jumping and I get eaten by the bear and they all fall to their deaths, to make this a really dark example, I'd rather get eaten by the bear and not, like if it's a no-win situation, I'd rather have all the information. Yeah, I'd rather have all the information. I'm not just going to jump for no reason. And if I happen to get eaten by the bear, I happen to get eaten by the bear. But 99.9% of the time, there's no bear.
Lava.
Right? There's just people jumping off a cliff. And I think a lot of the problem comes from the limited information that we get and the lack of English or Spanish or Portuguese or whatever language it is that you speak in these things. And all of the terms and conditions are written in such a way, one, because lawyers love to be vague, because vagueness gives them wiggle room, which, Scott, if you've never seen the wiggle room commercials, I'll have to send you those afterwards. You'll enjoy those. It's like an angry badger used car dealer. I just love saying wiggle room. It's great. But it gives them wiggle room, but it also makes it harder for us to really know what's going on. And so if they can come out and clarify it, it would solve that whole situation. Mika said, I think it's risky to use paid mockups because they're mass used. Well, mockups that you buy would be less used than if everybody had to use Printify's mockup, right? But the bigger thing that you can run into with that, and again, I think this is something that's contributing to the hype around this, is you might not be showing the actual product. That is a risk that you run. So if you don't know what a Bella Canvas 3001 t-shirt looks like, don't just go buy a random Etsy mockup that says that's what it is, because that could lead you to getting your listing shut down. Whether the mockups are related to this or not, that would be, if it's not the exact thing that you're selling, that would be a violation of Etsy's image policy. If it's a 3002, right? I don't know what the difference is. I don't know that anybody knows what the difference is unless they work at Bella Canvas. But if you're not listing the exact thing, that is an image policy violation. And so the safest thing to do, if you're 100% safe, would only be to ever use the Printify mockups. Is that the best thing to do from a business standpoint? Probably not, because as much as I love our friends over at Printify, mockups aren't great, man.
No.
most of the other mockups that we've used.
But also, Chris, wait a minute. But think about this for a second. How bad would the Etsy platform look like if all you could use was everyone used the same exact mockup?
Right. I type in t-shirt and I get the entire listing page of the.
All you see is the same one, right? And the crazy thing is, and this is the other debate that's going on, is Printify and Placeit. So Placeit, those are recommended in Printify to basically go over and use the Placeit ones, but they're not Printify's, they're Placeits.
And Placeit would not be the production partner.
Exactly.
Right. And so you could never use a Placeit one. You could never use a single the interpretation.
It just doesn't add up.
Or interpreting, I guess interpreting, I don't think is a word. Interpreting the policy that way makes zero sense to me. And maybe I'm the only, let me know in the comments if like you guys read that Etsy image policy and you say, oh, well, it's the production partner. Here's kind of, Scott, the way I think that language was written. The initial interpretation of production partner was when they were still almost exclusively handmade. And this to me makes sense looking at the image policy. So, and I think I rattled this off to you yesterday. We have a wood shop, right?
We do.
I make tables. You make chairs. I have the Etsy store. On the chairs, you're my production partner. So thinking about it that way, all the listings of the chairs, you can create the photos for, and you would be the one that is the production partner. So you would have the finished product.
Right.
I'm not going to have the finished product. When it comes to print on demand, that is much closer to like their custom product policy, where they're like, yeah, like get us something that's pretty close. And then everything else can be computer aided imagery. I think is what the verbiage says there. Right. And so it would not make any sense for them to interpret it that way, to say that Printify, who by the way, is not doing the printing, Printful would be doing the printing. Printify does not do the printing. They are a network. So to say that they are the only people that could create a mockup makes zero sense. And oh, by the way, we had a bunch of people in the comments say, I've bought a lot of t-shirts from Printify that don't match the color of the mockup because of how they lit it or whatever, right? So even those aren't 100% accurate. So to interpret that policy as the reason that all of this is happening, to me, makes zero sense.
Well, here's the other thing too. So, and I want you to think about this, is like, and this has been happening again, back to the Amazon days, right? Is there's services right now that you can ship your product to a photographer and they will video it or they will shoot it and you can get those images. Like you literally pay for that service, right? But it's the shirt. So why, if we're using a mock-up is just a term of someone took the product and shot it in a very well lit and photographed with good quality equipment and all of that stuff and put some, some nice, texture things into it or design things into it, right? Like my wife's a photographer. She, we had a photography business. This would be right up her alley, right? So we could take the stuff and she would decorate around it and take like a over the head shot and all that stuff, right? But you're not a photographer and you want to have a really good mock-up. So why can't you buy, and we keep using the word mock-up, it's a photographer that shot the image for you of the product. And now you're just basically putting your print, your design on the shirt or the t-shirt or the sweatshirt or the pillow or whatever it is. But it's the same thing that you're selling. I don't see anything wrong with that.
So Scott, that's actually how we got to that other interpretation when we were talking about the rumors, where people were saying you have to get samples of everything, because that is a computer aided design image. And that can only be used for custom products,
right?
According to the terms of service, right? No, because what it actually says, at least based on my English non-lawyer reading of the terms of service, is the image has to accurately represent the product, right? So we can't put a sweatshirt photo on a t-shirt listing, or a tumbler on a mug listing, or a shirt that's not the shirt on that listing. And as long as it accurately represents the product, then it should be fine, right? Should be being the keyword there. They can interpret this however they want, but we also have to keep in mind that they would lose hundreds of millions of dollars by interpreting it the other way. So they have a huge financial incentive to not interpret it that way and to interpret it in the way that it is accurately representing the product. And as long as it's accurately representing the product, that should be okay. Anybody from Etsy can feel free to tell me that I'm wrong. I will not hashtag shave my eyebrows, as somebody suggested in the comments. I will not be doing that. But regardless, right, what do we do to protect against this? It's really all about making sure that we're doing everything that we can. If we have the niche-based approach, that gets us a long way there. If we have an email list in case something silly happens, that gets us an even further way there. And if we have the resources, the time, the energy, and the effort to build our own website, that gives us another leg to stand on if something silly ever happens. The real answer here is Anytime we build a business on somebody else's ground, we potentially run into this issue. But the traffic and sales and ease of use that come from a platform like Etsy are absolutely worth it if you're trying to get started. We just have to think through this logically and calmly and think about what would make sense with the policy. And if it turns out that we're wrong, it turns out that we're wrong, right? But I would rather use all of the time, energy, and effort that I see so many people wasting on stressing about having to go in and change all of their images on learning one of the other skills or setting up one of the other legs of that stool that I'd like to see people have.
Yeah. I want to speak to this for a second because I saw other people commenting in another Facebook group and in a thread. And I've saw, recently some people here, were actually saying it as well. And that is right now, this might be good news for you and me. Why? Why would it be good news for you or me? Because there's a lot of people now jumping ship. There's a lot of people that are, not on the up and up. They're gone. So it is going to thin things out. And for us, we have to look at it as what can we do? And I've always operated like this. And if you go back and watch any videos that I've shot here on this channel about trademark infringement, warning, everything, I've tried to do everything I can possible to bring this to light, to bring this to people's attention. But if you operate as a business, as a brand, all right, and you are thinking along the lines of, I'm doing everything I can legit, right? I'm not riding the line. We know if we're riding the line, right? We know it, okay? But we want to know, are we operating like a business, like a brand? If you were a business, a brand, and you had, a full team, and you had people working for you, would you jeopardize that by not following the rules? We're not saying that the rules are right now that you have to shoot your product yourself. Is it the best practice? Probably. Is it going to be easy to do for a lot of people? No. But the people that do, it will separate you. You will have an original mock-up, which is something that we'll probably consider doing in the future. Okay. I'll just throw that out there. And it's not going to be for maybe all our products. It might be for the top products. Might start there. So it is an opportunity for us that are willing to put the time, the effort, and to ride out this wave because, or this, I guess, cloud, or, get out from under the cloud. But it's to let's think about this. Like, how can we better our shops? How can we do a better job and really represent Etsy's platform the way that it was intended? If you recall, you couldn't sell print on demand stuff before. It was all handmade. That's all it was. And then they allowed us. And then you're going to get people that are going to abuse it, and they're going to start using drop shipping, and they're going to start using private label, and they're going to start doing all the things that are going to mess things up. And same thing with AI. AI comes out and everyone goes crazy and they start creating digital art and they start creating digital mock-ups and they don't represent the product. And then all of a sudden, here we are. So to me, I'm looking at this as, okay, yes, it could be a warning. So let's not look at it and say to ourselves, like, are we doing everything okay? Are we going to be in trouble here? And if we are, we need to make adjustments. But we also need to look at this like this could be a big opportunity for us, the ones that are not just slapping up designs, going into Canva and just taking a couple elements, putting them together and calling them their own, right? I know my wife will layer sometimes 10, 15 different items to make it her own from different sources too, right? So it's also a way for us to say we're eliminating some of the competition. The people that don't want to do the extra work, the people that don't want to put in the extra time. So I look at this as like, this might be a good thing. Actually, it is a good thing, and sometimes we have to take a step back and look at it that way and say, wow, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do things differently. And I'm going to make sure that I'm doing things better and making the platform better and making my shop better by following these rules, but also by learning from what other people are struggling with. But I look at this as like another opportunity for us to be able to rise above right? And we've seen this for years, people that build websites and they do black hat tactics and they drive up the rankings and they get first page and they start making a ton of money. And then all of a sudden Google comes out with an update. They call it a Google slap, bang, smack, boom, they're gone, lost everything. And then everyone else that was just kind of plugging away, boom, all of a sudden they're on top now. So that's kind of how I look at it. So my advice here on this situation, and again, take it for what you want or with it and do whatever you want with it. I personally just look at this like, if the product is being represented in the mockup, and if the mockup that is being sold to you is owned by the person that created it, like they actually shot it, and you might even want to reach out to the people that you're buying mockups from and ask them, are you physically owning the product? And are you filming and photographing the product? Are they your models, or are you using AI? You might even want to just reach out and ask that question. Because the way I look at this is like, it's probably not just an AI, this isn't just a mock-up situation. There's more to it. But I think the mock-ups that are being created that don't represent the product, that could be the problem. So anyway, Chris, that was a little bit of a rant, a little bit of a tangent, but I felt it needed to be done. And again, I don't look at this as like terrible, terrible news. I look at it like this could be good. This could be cleaning up, this could be cleaning up Etsy. Who knows?
It's cleaning up the wiki Wild Wild West. And that's kind of the thing that always happens, right? There's a big explosion. And I think using the Wild West is the perfect example of that, right? You had tens of thousands of people move to where there weren't a lot of people living. Then at some point they realized they should probably have a sheriff, right? They should probably have somebody like at least mildly enforcing some laws and stuff. And that doesn't mean that you still couldn't live your life and do all of the things that you were doing, but it also means that you do have to like not do illegal stuff, right? And that's really what a lot of this boils down to. And Scott, we had a couple people asking us, they said, hey, I have like children's stuff, like children's clothing, and I had a lot of my stuff taken down. And I think this is another grain of truth that we didn't dive into that is a little bit more of a specific thing. So Etsy back in August did update their child photography policy. To be more in line with the CSAM requirements. And basically, if you have children that are not fully clothed, that can be an issue. And that would be an issue in your mockups specifically. But from what I've seen, the rest of the people that are talking about this are not selling like children's clothes. And Etsy actually has an entirely separate image policy for images that contain children. I'm not going to read it out because it's a great way to have us banned on YouTube just because of the vocabulary that's included and the subject matter that's included. But if you just type in imagery of minors Etsy into Google, you can find that, and they will have their entire policy that is in there. And that did go into effect in September. And Scott, I think that's a good example of how Etsy updates policies. They give you 30 days notice. So if they were changing this policy, they would have given 30 days notice, just like they did with that. And I think that combined with all of the other IP stuff that's going on right now is kind of what led people to reading the communications that they read the way that they read them, rather than looking at this from a more holistic standpoint. They said, oh, I saw somebody had a thumbnail or an image taken down because they were violating the image of minors policy. I got this email from Etsy that said, hey, I can't use other people's product photos. Got to be the mockups, right? And it's that jump to conclusion. Scott, do you remember Office Space?
Oh yeah.
So there, it's a big jump on the jump to conclusions map. One of those things, right? We have to think about this logically and kind of think through it. Scott, we still have a whole bunch of people asking questions and stuff. Is there anything else you wanted to address? I mean, we could hang out all day and kind of talk through the policy, but is there anything else you wanted to leave people with, or you wanted to address directly before we jump off?
Yeah, no, again, I just kind of want to reiterate, like, yes, there's something happening. It's obvious, but what is happening? Why are people getting deactivated or shut down or getting warnings? We're still investigating that, right? Like we kind of gave you here what we know right now from the different people that we were able to get in touch with, or being able to read through the comments and kind of combing through and trying to get as much information. But I will say this, if you are someone that has been contacted by Etsy and has been giving a warning and, possibly because you think it is a mock-up or maybe it's a handmade issue, let us know. email support@brandcreators.com and let us know. The more you can give us, the more that we can report on it. We will be doing probably another one of these on Wednesday, just with an update, just to kind of see what we've learned since today till then. So we will definitely be doing that. So definitely make sure that you subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Make sure that you share this or like it. It'll give us a little bit more of a boost also in the algorithm of YouTube and even on Facebook. So this way here, more people can see this. We want to get this out to as many people as we can, so we can pool everybody together, so we can maybe have a stand, and maybe we can get Etsy's attention. Maybe we can actually get someone that I can interview on the podcast and or on YouTube, and that would be amazing, right? But we just want to get more details, and I think if anyone out there can help us with that, that would be absolutely amazing. We did talk about what can you do to more or less protect yourself in a sense, but also give yourself leverage. And there's actually two things. The first one, and to me is the one that I would start right now if you aren't doing it, is I would start building that email list. I would start building the email list. If you already have customers on Etsy, you can go ahead and you can start using those customers, or actually getting those customers on your email list. There's different ways that you can do that. Right now, there's only one integration within Etsy, but coming soon. And depending on when you're watching this, if you're here live, it'll be in a couple of weeks. There's going to be Everbee's coming out with one of their tools that's going to allow this to be super, super simple. And it's all within terms of service. And I'm going to be doing a free workshop on that at the end of the month. So again, make sure that you subscribe to this channel. You'll be notified. And then also make sure that you download this. I'm going to go ahead and put that up on the screen again. And that is brandcreators.com/email. If you go there, it's a free download. It's a playbook that we have that we put together that goes through how we've been using email. And this goes for all the brands that we've built in the past up till today. But this also focuses on the Etsy side. All right. So make sure that you go through that, brandcreators.com/email. And if you aren't yet using Everbee and you want access to that when that does get released, you can go ahead and actually, let's put that up real quick again too, Chris. If you go to emailforshops.com, you can go ahead and you can get, let's see, it's 50% off for 2 months of Everbee, the growth plan, which will give you access to the email list building and the email broadcast and email for reviews and all of the things that they're going to have built in. You'll get access to all of that on the growth plan, and you can get 50% off for 2 months. So there's that. And other than that, I just wanted to say, let's take a breath, right? Let's understand, like, yes, it's a lot of the unknown, but don't go overreacting. Okay. And, do what feels right for you. If you want to go ahead and put your store in vacation mode because you think that that's going to like pause things for you, go for it. If that's going to make you sleep better at night, then do it. We're not doing that. If you feel like your mock-ups are riding the line or they're in question and you think that that could be something that's being flagged, even though you haven't been warned yet, do something about it. Then update them or create new ones or create your own, or pause those listings, like whatever is going to make you more comfortable. All I can tell you is for us, we're kind of business as usual. We're not really changing anything as of right now. Okay. If we do, I will report on that and I will let you guys know. All right. So that's what we wanted to share with you guys here today. I want to thank you guys for coming out. We had well over at the peak here, I think we had over 475 people that came together for this live. So I want to thank each and every one of you for showing up and adding to the comments. And if you're watching this later on the replay and you have new information or you have a story you want to share or any of that stuff, please drop it in the comments. And we'll go ahead and we're going to be reading through them, and we'll either reach out to you or you can basically just ping us in the comments, and we'll be able to get in touch with you. All right. So guys, that is it. That's going to wrap this up. I want to again, thank you guys so much. Let's just take a breath, and everything's going to be okay. All right. At least I hope so. All right. So guys, that's it. That's going to wrap it up. As always, take care, take action, have an awesome, amazing day. We'll see you right back here on the next video, on the next episode. Take care, guys.